If you've ever looked at a rising grocery bill, worried about making rent, or felt that knot in your stomach about losing everything, you know how heavy economic anxiety can be. It is a very real, very human fear. John Paul DeJoria faced this exact nightmare in mid-century Los Angeles. At 22 years old, he was struggling to find his footing in an unforgiving economy. Then his fragile stability collapsed. He came home one afternoon to find his wife had left him and their 2-year-old son. She had emptied their meager bank accounts and hidden 3 months of unpaid eviction notices. By the next morning, he and his toddler were on the street. Without any safety net, they moved into a borrowed, broken-down 1951 Cadillac. The car's water pump was shattered, requiring DeJoria to manually pour water into the engine every few hours just to keep it running. He spent his days scanning vacant lots and sidewalks, collecting discarded glass soda bottles. He traded them then at local grocery stores for 2 to 5 cents apiece, gathering just enough pennies to buy high-calorie food to keep his young son alive. This terrifying descent is what we call the drop. DeJoria learned that when you fall to the absolute gutter, looking up from the street, and manage to survive, the paralyzing fear of failure vanishes. He knew he could endure the worst-case scenario. Needing a way out, he eventually landed a grueling job in direct sales. For 5 years, he walked the streets of Los Angeles selling encyclopedias door to door. It was brutal work. DeJoria routinely had 30 to 40 doors physically slammed in his face before a single person would even listen to his pitch, let alone buy anything. He was asking working-class families to commit to a luxury item that cost nearly $400. To make it work, he had to convince them to adopt tight $36 monthly payment plans, supported by daily quarter deposits into literal coin banks. To survive this daily rejection, he created a strict personal rule. He promised himself he would approach the 51st door with the exact same enthusiasm and belief as the first door, regardless of 50 consecutive no's. Over 5 years, this repetition forged a psychological armor. He trained his mind to see rejection as a simple mathematical probability, completely separating his personal worth from a closed door. A decade later, by 1980, the United States was caught in severe economic turmoil. Inflation was suffocating the middle class, interest rates spiked above 17%, and severe energy shortages caused massive lines at gas stations across the country. Right in the middle of this chaos, DeJoria prepared to launch a new hair care company with his friend Paul Mitchell. But at the final hour, a critical backer panicked about the economy and withdrew their entire $500,000 investment. At 36 years old, DeJoria was completely destitute and living in his car once again. Because he had already survived the drop years earlier, he didn't panic. Stripped of his fear, he and Mitchell pooled their absolute last resources, exactly $700, and launched the company anyway. The iconic black and white packaging was a cost-saving measure during the launch. On a $700 budget, they simply couldn't afford expensive color printing. Operating out of his car, DeJoria went door to door to salons, physically demonstrating how their products saved time and money. He created a wave of organic repeat orders that allowed John Paul Mitchell Systems to grow into a global billion-dollar enterprise without a single line of outside credit. By 1989, he was financially secure, but his lack of fear drove him toward a new target. At the time, the entire tequila category was widely viewed as a cheap, abrasive drink reserved strictly for loud, chaotic parties. This chart shows his risk. The small bar represents the typical $5 tequila. The towering bar is Patrón. Insisting on 100% blue agave and traditional crushing forced a $37 price. Distributors refused to stock it, insisting consumers would never pay a 600% premium. Shielded by the rejection armor he built selling encyclopedias, DeJoria ignored the distributors entirely. He walked his bottles directly into the kitchens of elite cultural tastemakers, like celebrity chef Wolfgang Puck, asking them to taste the quality for themselves. He also tapped his personal network to get the distinctive bottles placed in the hands of Hollywood stars, including Clint Eastwood. As affluent consumers began asking for it by name, the distributors who initially mocked the idea had no choice but to stock it. Patrón grew from 1,000 cases in its first year to nearly 3 million cases annually. By ignoring the established rules, DeJoria created the ultra-premium tequila category out of thin air. The man who once scavenged for glass bottles on the streets of Los Angeles now commands a net worth of roughly $3 billion. But he doesn't use this immense capital to distance himself from his past. He uses it to address the exact struggles he endured, guided by a lesson he learned when he had absolutely nothing. During a harsh winter in his youth, his mother handed him a single dime to drop into a Salvation Army bucket. She explained that no matter how difficult their own situation was, there was always someone out there facing deeper deprivation. He carried that lesson into his wealth. He signed the Giving Pledge, committing the majority of his fortune to charitable causes, and applies his business skills to lift up marginalized communities. Among his many projects, he heavily funds Community First Village in Texas. This master plan development provides permanent, dignified homes and community support for the chronically homeless, the exact demographic he once belonged to. His entire empire runs on a single unwavering rule: success unshared is failure. Surviving the absolute bottom stripped away his fear and cleared a path to extreme wealth, and it forged the deep empathy he now uses to serve as a benefactor.